Let's get Russo and save my opinion for later because this is more important. Michael, thanks for the time. Good morning.
Good morning. What's up?
Why do you think now, with Bruce Boudreau getting fired, like why now, this morning, this specific moment?
You know, it's a good question. I don't think that it's because, you know, Bruce wanted to make the playoffs and Billy's looking at a total rebuild here. I think that Billy just feels like it's time to make a change. He was going to definitely make a change at the end of the year, which was quite obvious. You know, right now I think that he wasn't happy the way the team has been playing, even though they've been winning some games here. And last night, I'm sure there were some final straws that happened during the game. It was another blown lead at home. The power play was really bad. And now he makes a decision, but we haven't talked to Billy yet. Other than the fact that I talked to Boudreau for about 5 minutes this morning, and he basically just said that Billy told him that this is something that he's been thinking about for a while.
I mean, I can understand, Michael, where, you know, if you already know it's coming, then maybe the right thing to do is to let Bruce go because it's going to happen. But, you know, don't you think there was still another scenario here where the team plays better, finds itself into an 8 seed, and, you know, anything happens, and you've still got another path to success for this year with Bruce?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that trust me, I'm shocked. When Bruce didn't get fired last month, earlier this season, going into the bye,
sure,
I thought he was absolutely safe going into the year. And then the other day, or going into the final stretch drive of the season, and then the other day when Billy said, look, if he senses any quit from the team, he's going to make more trades. So that tells me that this is a GM that feels that they can make the playoffs. So I think he's trying to get this team's attention. There's no doubt about it. I think that he feels like this team, and I know he does because I've talked to him about this, is that this team actually, if it could get, especially to the 7th spot where it crosses over to the Pacific Division, that they've got a chance to actually do something in the playoffs. Now, well, you know, I have my doubts based on the fact that right now their goaltending is not very good, and I don't know how far you can take that in a playoff run. But this team's 3 points out of a playoff spot. Last night was very dejecting for the team, even though they still got 1 point and moved within 3 points. But they got 3 games in hand on Arizona, and you look at a lot of those teams in the top 8, and you could say the Wild are at a minimum even with them, and even more so, you could say a lot of those teams in the Pacific, the Wild are a better team then. So I think that Billy actually, the competitor that he is, he wants to make the playoffs. But this today, there's no doubt it was a shocking move, and we'll have to see what Billy Guerin says about the decision after he meets with the media later on today.
We've been making the case that there wasn't fan outrage for this. Did you hear anything inside the locker room to suggest, or the fans necessarily wanted this? Did you hear anything inside the locker room to suggest that this is something that was player motivated? There was pressure from inside the locker room to let Bruce go?
No, I don't think so. I mean, look, there are a couple players in there that aren't fans of Bruce. I think that's obvious.
Mm-hmm.
But that happens with every single coach. I think the majority of these guys play for him. I think that the last night it was just dejecting watching some of these guys play. I mean, Matt Zuccarello can't find a place on this team right now in the lineup. He was so bad last night. Galchenyuk was bad. There were a lot of guys on the back end that weren't very good, and you know, maybe Billy's not happy with the way that some of these guys are being deployed or whatever. But you know, Billy's not the type of guy that I think that would you know, all of a sudden have an open door for a bunch of players to say we want this change. I don't think if that was the case, it would have been happened a long time ago.
Michael Russo, The Athletic, theathletic.com. First place we saw that Wild coach Bruce Boudreau had been fired about an hour ago. That's when Russo tweeted it at their practice facility, Tria, by general manager Bill Guerin. Michael's on very short time. Couple of quickies to close here. Now, with specifically yesterday, and you mentioned in passing that, you know, this may have been something that had been brewing with the general manager, but they kept winning. Then they lost last night, some things he didn't like. So now Bruce is out. When I was texting with Bruce, as I shared earlier, that this, according to Bruce, was unexpected for him and or his wife, Crystal. So if you do it in second to none fashion, Mike, and I've been around this thing with Vox in the Box pretty closely too. It's like whether it's Mike Yo or whomever, when this happens, the person generally kind of has an idea that something is swirling. I'm getting the opinion, or I'm getting the feeling, that Bruce is completely caught off guard. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is fair. Look, Bruce every single day wakes up thinking that he's not going to be the coach next year, and that's going to be a tough existence for a coach. But I don't think any of us thought that he was going to show up to work today when the team has points in 8 of its last 11 games, and he'd wind up fired. So he would trust me. I talked to him I talked to him honestly moments after he was fired, right when he got in his car, and he was shocked. He said Billy just basically said that this was a decision that he'd been thinking about, and he just walked out of the room and left the practice facility. So, that's the way it happens. There are some, when Mike Yeo was fired, Chuck Fletcher and him sat in his office after the game against the Boston Bruins and had a beer, cried over the beer, and then life went on with John Torchetti the next day, and coincidentally they were flying to Vancouver just like the Wild are coming up here next week. So, it's a tough day, and now it'll be interesting to see the way this team plays. I mean, they've got to get goaltending. That's what it just comes down to. They cannot go far without that. Last night was they worked hard last night, but there were just too many passengers in that game, and this team is not good enough to have that every single night. You can't have 12, 13 players show up. And when the top two lines are not performing the way they have not for some time now, you just knew that there was going to have to be some sort of change. I thought it would be player related. But look, the top two lines were just god awful last night, and this has been a constant theme. I mean, if it wasn't for Fiala, the top line had been doing nothing for a while. He goes there and sparks that, but taking Fiala off the second line killed that line. And so that to me says that Billy's going to want a lot more from guys like Zuccarello, Parisi, Eric Staal, now Galchenyuk. But you can't win in this league on a consistent basis by just having your third and fourth line scoring. And so we'll see what happens here. I've got to think at some point Donato's got to move up in the lineup. You do wonder at some point if you bring up a Jerry Mayhew. And as I've written for a long time now, they are definitely thinking after the trade deadline about, especially if this team fizzles here, about bringing Kakinen up and giving him a good look going into next year. So we'll see what happens.
Most of us don't know anything about Dean Evason. Can you give us any background on the new interim head coach?
Really good player. I know that Mike Modano. He was a really good player. Coached the Milwaukee Admirals, made the playoffs a lot of years, didn't have really any success in the playoffs a lot of times because Nashville was calling up their players for their stretch drives. But I think his last 13 or 14 playoff games in Milwaukee, he only won one or so games. I got to double check that. I remember writing that at the time.
Yeah.
So he'll be the interim the rest of the way. Coincidentally, again, this was Paul Fenton's hire. It was a big point of contention. Bruce was not happy when Dean Evason was brought in, even though Dean was his assistant coach in Washington. Mm-hmm. Remember, Paul Fenton fired his best friend, John Anderson, to put Dean Evason on the bench. So there was not a very tight relationship between those two the last year and a half since Dean's gotten here. But the big thing is who's going to be the next coach of this team. I know for a fact that Billy Guerin loves Gerard Gallant. I'm not sure that Gerard's in love with this situation here in Minnesota. So we'll see what happens there. Because also I think Detroit is going to fire Jeff Blashill at the end of the year, and I think Gallant has a real good chance to go in there, or maybe he even winds up with expansion Seattle. But the other big name that I've been saying for a year now, since actually before Bill Guerin was hired here, is Dougie Wade. Dougie's one of his best friends. He's taken the year off after coaching the Islanders, and again, Barry Trotz replaced him. I've long thought that Dougie Wade would come to this organization in some capacity, at a minimum in management, but maybe he's a candidate to take over as head coach as well.
Hey, thanks for the effort on the short time, and I know you got a lot of work to do today. We will follow you at Russo Hockey via Twitter, and if you're not a subscriber, and I've been since the inception, theathletic.com for more with Michael Russo. Thank you, buddy.
Yep, see ya.
Yep, Russo Radio. Bruce Boudreau, fired by the